Hey everyone, it's the Nitty Professor. Yesterday at our orchestra concert, when we were talking about video games, one of the commentators about one of the video games we were playing said something that I thought was really inspiring. He said that kindness is subversive. And I was thinking to myself, gosh, that, kind of speaks to me, this whole idea of kindness being a form of subversion, especially in the current political climate, the current, dare I say, global climate. So I thought it'd be fun to explore this concept a little bit, and I have a few points that we can look into, and I welcome your input and your thoughts on this topic. So one of the things that is kind of a through line of a lot of political regimes nowadays is that they thrive on reducing people to categories, including enemies or friends, and also reducing us to abstractions. And I think that we could argue that the opposite generally holds true when it comes to crafting, fiber crafting, knitting. For example, we think about this sweater, right? This sweater is so unique and personal. It's pretty much just for me. We think about knitting a hat that would be sized for a specific person's head. Recently, my daughter-in-law, through my son, requested a hat for Christmas, and I was like, I'm not sure if anything I make would fit her head with her hair. I have next to no hair. That's pretty rare for women, and I know my son has a large head, so I have to keep that in mind when I knit for him. So I can knit a bunch of hats for me, and I know exactly what I'm doing. But when I try to knit a hat for someone else, I may or may not know what I'm doing. So we're looking at a very important value of individualization when it comes to crafting, making something especially for someone. Or when you think about socks, like my sock pattern is for my feet. Every time I talk to my son about I should knit a pair of socks for him, I'm like, okay, let me think about how the dimensions would work, because my socks won't work on your feet. Or even a blanket, somebody's going to make a baby blanket and they're going to think in terms of the baby, the relationship of the baby with the family, the proclivities of the parents as far as decor, fiber, any allergies, all kinds of things. So I think that's a good point, is that kindness and fiber crafting in relation to kindness is kind of subversive in subverting the tendency of the, dare I say, the military-industrial complex to reduce people to categories. It's a very, very interesting point about the subversion of kindness. And slowness is another aspect that we can kind of point to in this regard, because when you think about it, speed is sort of inherently important in society today to a large extent. Just, being on time, being on schedule. Something my son talks about a lot, the one who lives in Atlanta, is just that everybody drives 10 miles over the speed limit. And when I'm in Omaha, where my daughter lives, I just can't keep up with the speed demons going down Dodge Street. I mean, it's just, everybody is in such a hurry. It's like modern political systems and economic systems reward speed, but not just speed. They also reward outrage. They reward reaction. Look at what's going on now with the Middle East. I mean, it's just like all of a sudden we've got this incredible thing going on, and sometimes you just have to wonder if outrage isn't the point. Knitting, on the other hand, I've been working on this for a long, long time. There's nothing fast about this project. This has been going on for 9 months, maybe a little more. Knitting requires patience. Knitting, fiber crafting, also requires sustained attention, which is kind of a really neat thing when you compare that to modern culture. Fast fashion. Everything is just designed to last a minute and then you move on to the next thing. Well, anything I make with my hands is going to take months, especially for me, because I always have 18 projects going on at the same time. But it does sometimes feel kind of subversive. I get to sit here and just work on maybe spinning one thread or making one garment, and I'm not worried about, having a huge collection of the latest fast fashion tops or shoes or whatever, Choosing slow creation over constant consumption is like a refusal to live in perpetual urgency. And Lord knows, especially nowadays, urgency just seems to be on the daily menu. And it's just so draining. It's just, we really need this connection to fiber and tradition and craft, and the opportunity to practice calm persistence while the world outside is demanding that we be constantly agitated and upset and harried and worried. It's just exhausting. We can't live like that, And it's kind of a cool idea. The guy last night was talking about kindness in relation to a video game. I think it might have been Undertale. And it was just so heartening to hear that, and to just posit this notion that I can try to make that the center of my own existence, if I work hard enough, especially through crafting. Another thing that's really cool, and this is something that we've talked about before, is the idea of care made visible, care made tangible through crafting, making something for someone, even if it's just for yourself. I mean, making this sweater for me is like telling me that I'm caring about me, and I can enjoy wearing this garment that I spent a lot of time making and creating and thought put into it, and being able to cover my body in this wonderful thing that I crafted is a kind of care that is probably not going to be extended to me by Amazon. They're always bombarding me with, oh, we found something you might like. Won't you take a look? I'm like, dude, cuss word you. But when we offer handmade items, it's like reclaiming nurturing labor as a kind of a piece, a valuable piece of the social infrastructure, the connections, the bonds that link us to one another and that draw us in community in a way that, commercialized products fail to do. When you buy all those things that Amazon tells you to buy, there's no social infrastructure. It all has nothing to do with anything except economics and arguably transferring a lot of wealth upward. Not kindness. Kindness is very subversive in that regard. It has nothing to do with transferring wealth upwards. And it challenges the idea that only profit-generating work matters. There's a lot of other work that matters. And I see that in my students. I'm teaching a course on educational methods for teaching students with visual impairments. Most of the students in my class are in special education, and I think about what they do day in and day out for not a lot of money and often extra hours, and what motivates them is just the care. It's not the idea of like a bunch of profit generating work. Yes, they get paid, and yes, they get benefits, but not in the way that, the CEO of Amazon does, right? This notion of care being central to our social infrastructure, I think, is a really potent idea that kindness can help us to build connections and bonds in a way that commercial capitalist endeavors aren't liable to do. And when you think about like gatherings and groups of people getting together, like the mutual aid, charity knitting groups, and like people who make prayer shawls. I was talking to a friend of mine at the recent Fiber Guild meeting, and she was making a prayer shawl for someone. And it's just the coolest thing, because the whole point of that is it's a kind of a mutual aid, but it's also just a way to celebrate a young person for a milestone in their life and let them know that they're loved, that they're cared for, people making refugee projects, maybe it could be blankets or hats or baby items, baby blankets, caps, sweaters. A friend of mine knits baby sweaters left and right, and it has nothing to do with the market. In fact, I think the yarn she just sort of stumbles upon. It's probably donated or, gotten at secondhand stores. And so the whole purpose of her work is to operate outside of market logic and just to privilege her human connections to even perfect strangers, because she doesn't know who those are going to go to. There's a kind of a notion of bypassing bureaucracy, bypassing ideology, and sort of operating outside of those structures and just like heart to heart, in a form of compassion that is like a web instead of, a centralized structure with a hierarchy. That's not how care communities work. Care communities are like webs of mutual compassion. Kindness is decentralized. It's not hierarchical. And in that sense, it's very unlike the structures that normally run our lives. When I think of, like my kids' relationships with their bosses, for example, the hierarchy can feel very oppressive. And there are all these sources of leverage, like, how much of a raise and what does it mean if you don't get the raise? Metrics, that kind of thing. Compassion has nothing to do with any of that. It's not bureaucratic. It doesn't bean count. It doesn't engage in gatekeeping. It's not even institutionalized necessarily. It could be, right? But I see a lot of people out there are just being kind because that's what they want to do. And it feels kind of subversive in a lot of ways, We don't necessarily see the government just going out there and saying, okay, it's time to be kind, It's time to wield power. That's what they're doing. What about the notion of, like, repairing things instead of throwing them away? Darning, mending, building opposition to the culture of extraction replacement, the throwaway culture that surrounds us all the time, kind of aligns with the idea of being kind to the earth. And that's a notion that I just don't hear that enough nowadays. People talking about being kind to the earth. Now, we've just returned to this previous age of extract, without a thought or a care, at least in this country. I mentioned, I was talking to an insurance agent the other day, and I mentioned how I was like, climate change, that must be a big concern in your industry. And he was like, oh, we don't talk about that anymore. I'm like, how is that even possible? So the whole idea of being kind to the earth is just kind of evaporated. And yet, when we do this in a way, we're inviting ourselves to be kind to the earth because we are rejecting throwaway culture. We are leaning in towards sustainability, and repair culture specifically is a perfect mechanism for that. When you say a particular object, and maybe by extension the person that uses or wears it is worth repairing, it's almost a kind of a ethical radicalism in a way. It's kind of crazy. Going back to the, like my friend who is making sweaters for babies she'll never meet. Hospitality towards a stranger. Isn't that a nice idea, right? Kindness toward people we don't know, people who don't look like us, people who don't think like us, people who we may never meet, who don't even share our values. We often make items for people we'll never meet. And I've run across, and a lot of you will comment, well, I've been making hats for homeless people. Are you ever going to meet those people? Are you ever going to have a conversation with that person? Maybe, maybe not. But that's not the point. The whole idea is, and it's a very, let's face it, it's a very Christian idea. Hospitality towards the stranger, the Good Samaritan, taking care of people because guess what? They're people, that it's kind of radical. It's like we forget people's humanity, and it just, I just can't get over it. My son and I were talking about that today, you know, with this whole Iran thing. It's like, I was like, it's so easy for people to forget that there are 90 million people over there, and we forget they're people like us. They have, you know, hopes and dreams and fears and vulnerabilities, and we can't forget that, you know, and kindness is a reminder that we have to put that front and center, that people are people, strangers, it doesn't matter. And that it's not about transactions. I hear all this stuff about, you know, oh, we want to make a deal. Otherwise, we're gonna send some bombs your way. So transactional. Even, I mean, on another note, at my puppy training class the other day, somebody was saying, well, you shouldn't give your dog a treat every time you try to get him to do something, because that ends up being transactional. I admit I give Ari a lot of treats, but my hope is that I can eventually wean him and hopefully he won't, you know, regard me as someone who's just out to manipulate him all the time. But you know, when you're talking about that with human beings, it really just seems so wrong. Transactional social norms is like the current trend, and it's just, it dehumanizes everyone. Makers accept vulnerability, and they accept that the recipient of whatever they make may never even know who cared for them. And that's the way it should be. That is what makes the world a better place. Community is crucial. And when we're talking about community, we're not talking about communities that are driven by outrage-inducing algorithms, which are so prevalent nowadays. Personally, I've gotten kind of away from specifically Facebook. It's, you know, I'm like tempted to post something about the current political climate, and I just know I'm going to be pounced on by people who resemble hyenas more than they do people. Because outrage that's the whole point. That's the whole point. People feed on that. It's really easy. There must be something, I'm going to have to explore this too. There must be something in our emotional makeup that just causes us to get addicted, to be obsessed with our own outrage and stress. But when I'm in my fiber guild, there's no outrage, right? We're nice. And it's, on occasion, somebody will make a point that another person's like, I don't agree with that. You can discuss it, or you can drop it. But it's like this gentle, polite, courteous kind of way of fostering, maybe not even necessarily debate, but just exchange, you know, to grow and learn from each other instead of what goes on online. So community without algorithm is really a great thing. And it's a little bit tricky to lay your hands on. I think fiber crafting and craft spaces, knitting, spinning, crochet, all of that, those groups, those active communities often succeed at maintaining pluralism where political discourse fails, because political discourse surrounds antagonism. But fiber guilds, not so much. Let's hope not, anyhow. I've seen it happen at churches, right? But I don't know. I've had pretty good luck at fiber guilds at maintaining a sense of belonging and mutual support, listening, and that, you know, that can feel kind of subversive nowadays. Another thing that can feel kind of subversive is just the notion of hope, and that's a little hard to come by, and that's something that I think we all need. I don't know, some people, I guess they might argue against it, but I mean, I know parents who name their kids Hope because of how important they see it as being. And there's something about, like when I cast on this project, it's getting pretty long, it was a gesture of hope that at some point it would be a huge, colorful, finished scarf. And that hope still persists. I'm almost glad I haven't finished this project yet because I continue to knit on it. And it's very relaxing. It's probably my most relaxing project because of the beautiful colors as they unfold. And I can just sort of linger in that hope that it's going to be done. It's going to be so nice. Every long project is like an act of optimism, and even just to say there will be cold days down the road that are worth preparing for, worth it for me to be ready, because I know that the days from now till then will be worth living out, growing, developing, changing. And when I get to that point when I do have this scarf and I'm ready to wear it, I'll still feel the same way. And even that can feel subversive, and just the idea of tangible hope and hope that is enacted physically, manually, through manual labor or any kind of, tangible labor is harder to extinguish than other forms of hope, because I can see it, I can feel it, I can touch it, I can live it through, right? So the hope that I feel as a result of making this scarf is easier to remember and maybe digest is a good word, because of the fact that the actions of my hands are internalizing it for me. So that's a really cool thing. It's almost ritualistic. It's really, really helpful. And then if we think just about the gentleness of crafting, the slow fashion, that really is key. Sometimes I watch videos of people knitting on subways in other countries and stuff like that, and it just it makes me feel so happy, because there's not enough of that in the world. Always makes me want to see a flash mob of knitters, and I think that's a thing. I think that's actually something that people do. It's like gentleness is defiance, and especially in a harsh climate, and that doesn't necessarily need to be just a harsh physical climate like the one I live in, where we just had a freak snowstorm yesterday and didn't even know if an orchestra concert was going to happen. But in harsh, political climates, rhetorical climates, social climates, cruelty can become normalized, and we're seeing that. It's just something that you are taught almost to accept, and that's exactly the opposite of what we should be doing. And this reminder, through knitting, through crafting, through mutual aid, by realizing gentleness, feels very subversive in this moment. Continuing to choose softness is like a rebellion against brutality. And that feels pretty cool. Yeah. Fiber artists manufacture warmth and softness in a culture that rewards hardness. So those are some thoughts that I have today after hearing this man just throw out that one sentence last night during your concert. It was really cool that kindness is subversive. So let me know your thoughts on this topic, especially as it relates to fiber crafting or any kind of crafting. Be really curious what you think. I hope that you're okay and that you are finding gentleness, kindness, slowness, and hope through your crafting. Y'all take care. Bye.